Good night, everybody. This is Vocal Youth Zone Experience. This is our second VYZE Hangout, and you all know what the topic is tonight because we've been talking about it all over Facebook and otherwise. We're talking about the new National Youth Service, or proposed new National Youth Service, because as it has rightly been pointed out, nothing has been passed yet, right? So, unless you were under a rock last week, you would have heard talk about the recently announced, it was announced by the Minister of Youth, Stephen Lashley, and he was making reference to the draft National Youth Policy, which contains an element which refers to a new youth service. And the controversial part of this youth service, the proposal, is that it would be mandatory. This is volunteerism, which is usually a good thing for people, but as long as you have a choice. But it was proposed to be made mandatory. Now, the point I want to make is that since then, the minister has come out and said that it's not mandatory, that that part was mistaken. Or we, as far as this discussion is concerned, we're proceeding on the basis that it would be mandatory, because I really don't understand how it's mandatory, and if it's not mandatory, what's the announcement really saying? Are they just streamlining the service? So we're going to have a discussion based on that. Before we start, and I let everybody jump in, each person will have 2 minutes to speak, at which point any moderator will jump in and just keep the discussion going. The few points that I wanted to read to you about the basic things that we know, just to set the tone. The National Youth Service is written into the National Youth Policy, which is supposed to be debated in Parliament sometime soon. Secondly, the youth policy that is already existing has been in draft for close to 2 years now. It entails 200 hours of voluntary service over 14 years. That's between ages 15 and 29. The type of voluntary service is claimed to be wide-ranging and could even mean job attachments in a firm. Well, I shouldn't say it could mean, not that they automatically tie together, but it could help you get a job attachment in a firm which has focus in a particular career path that you might be interested in pursuing. So it's really being asked to volunteer 2 days a year out of your time for 14 years between ages 15 to 29. There is no provision, as far as we can tell, for any retroactive application of time spent. In other words, if you're 25, 26 now and you have served, you've done volunteer work over the course of your 20s or however old, you can't then claim for that time. And the biggest argument against is that you can find another way to encourage service and volunteerism among young people, but you cannot mandate. So here we are, people. I have Renee. We have Renee in the discussion. We have Damien. We have Lizelle, Maria B. Oh, Peter has joined us. And we have Patrice, who was not with us last week. Welcome, Patrice, as a newcomer. It's our second place discussion. So I just want to ask, and these conversations are completely unstructured, just for 1 or 2 people to jump in and give what their basic knee-jerk response was to the proposal when they first heard about it. I'll cut you off after 2 minutes and then just let 2 people respond to that. Whoever feels free to just jump in.
Can I jump in?
Sure. You're probably the worst person, but you go ahead.
Why would I be the worst person?
All right, you lay the groundwork.
Well, I think you've done a very interesting job in twisting the groundwork. But anyhow,
okay. Set the record straight. Mike, the floor is yours.
Alrighty. Well, first let me declare my hand. I served on the National Youth Policy Committee over the last 2 years. So I remember the exact date that we handed the policy over to the minister. If I am correct, it will probably be about a year, or just about a year ago, around this time actually, that the policy was officially handed over. What's amazing is that there's so many different elements to the policy, and that the only thing that people could seem to pick at was the whole element of community service and the National Community Service program. Which personally, I have no issue with, because there's no way that someone cannot do 200 hours in service. I mean, it's just impossible. And you said the minister said it's no longer mandatory, but I didn't hear him make that statement. So I guess I'll go on the same line as you in that I will say that let's say it was mandatory. I have absolutely no problem with it. I think it would only affect persons who haven't served or who aren't currently serving. And I think the rationale behind the recommendation was that if persons want to go to university and spend the government's money, if you want to take your national development scholarship and go wherever it is that you want to go and study and so on and so forth, why is it that you should not be asked to make some contribution to your fellow citizens? For those of us who are in the youth movement and who've been volunteering for a while for a number of years, it's not an issue. And 200 hours, the production of the youth festival last year, I probably spent more time there than I did at my job. So for me personally, from the standpoint of the committee, there is nothing wrong in asking young persons to give back. We know that there are some young people who do it and do it willingly and will not be a challenge for them. I think the challenge comes to those young people who might not want to get involved or who have not been involved. And before you cut me off, I believe that even if, let's say, monetarily they're forced into it, that they would benefit from it in the long run. And I think after the first two or three times, the first set of experiences, that they would willingly do it and not even be thinking about getting the credits as it relates to clocking up the hours of the case may be. So that is my 2 cents worth. There you have it.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, sorry, Patrice. Sorry, before you go, Maria wanted to have a word.
Okay,
Maria B. This is.
right. My hang up with the whole situation is at some schools, my son's school in particular, there's a policy of the students must serve in some extracurricular activity. There are key clubs, there are junior arms of quite a number of the social community serving groups we have. Wouldn't it be better to have a policy where that is done, where it can be policed, for lack of a better term, and you have a record of students doing the, you can count the hours and so, and I suppose children seeing their peers in organizations, and for most children, and they go to old people's homes, do things where they're serving people, they get a sense of fulfillment out of it, and then it becomes something that they enjoy doing rather than something that is forced upon them and they just count the hours literally as they do it to get it over and done with. I don't think the country as a whole benefits from it when you do it that way, as opposed to a child looking through a list of clubs at the school, seeing something that piques their interest, and giving their all to that particular organization. And it's a win-win. The child benefits because they get the satisfaction of doing something that they enjoy, and the person who's on the receiving end also benefits, and the country as a whole. Let me say here early, I'm going to have to duck out a little early because I'm off to work. So when I go, that's the reason why I'm leaving. I'm done now, for now, at least.
Thanks, Maria B. Patrice, you wanted to have a word.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something because from what I read and from my understanding of it, it was supposed to be over 2 years and not over 14 years. So I think that might also influence people's perception of it. The age range was from 15 to 29, which is 14 years. That's the age range. But when you're actually doing the service, from what I read in the policy, it would have been over a 2-year period that you'll be doing those 200 to 250 hours.
Thanks, Patrice. If I can jump into the questions, because we would have had Damien lay the background information because he was so intimately associated with everything going on. And then we would have had Maria's response in terms of what her concerns are, so for someone who actually has children. Can I jump in here with a question to ask? Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you at the beginning, if any of these words sound familiar, like you may have said them, that's because I copied and pasted. But,
Yeah. Okay.
if you're unable to do 200 hours of voluntary services, if you as an individual are unable to do 200 hours of voluntary services over a space of 14 years or 2 years, are you a bigger problem to society than you recognize? That's the question. Are you a problem to society if you feel as though you can't or you should not have to give back? Dive right in there, people.
Okay, I'll jump in. I guess like Damien and most of the people that are on here, a lot of us, we don't have a problem with volunteering or things like that because that we're accustomed to doing that or that's ingrained in us anyways. I guess for me, it was probably how it was presented. Like I was just minding my business and then I saw this article on the news and I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And then I saw mandatory and volunteering in the same sentence or same put together and I was a bit confused because it was like, how could volunteering be mandatory? That just kind of confused me a bit. But and for me too, I was like, well, where did this come from? This kind of came out from nowhere. And then, like Damien or Juliet and all these people pointed out that, well, oh, actually, there's been this document that's been in circulation. And I just felt a bit like, wow, I think usually I'm on top of things and I kind of know what's going on. And if I didn't know that, like this whole youth policy thing was being discussed and going on in the background, what about like just generally other people who aren't really connected or know about this stuff? So it just, for me, it kind of came out of nowhere. And I like the point that Maria made in terms of like, I think it should be tied into something that you're doing in schools already or things like that. I know a lot of schools, you have an element of volunteering component where it's like a class. You track your number of hours and you get credit for that kind of class and things like that. Because I agree with your point completely, Corey. If it's a problem to rack up these hours, then what really is your contribution to the society that you live in? So that's kind of worrying. It'll be interesting. In theory, I don't have a problem with what they've presented. It'll be interesting to see how and if it's implemented. You know me, I'm always about the how are we going to do the implementation, and we always seem to have a problem with that. So I'm interested to see how that's going to go forward.
Not just you, Maria K as well. Maria K, you listening?
Yeah. But that's also my biggest concern as well, the implementation. That to me is where I think the real problem is going to crop up in doing this. Because the idea, I don't have a problem with the idea at all. But when we know how things go, like youth service was a good idea when it first came about, but then, that just kind of went into this direction, and now I don't even hear about it. I don't even know how many people are involved in it still. So I could see this starting and then slowly becoming something that are not being tracked properly, is not going to be implemented properly at all, I think. That's my problem with this.
One of my... Is my mic on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm the newbie, so still trying to figure out all the technological aspects of it. One of my concerns about it, and let me just say that I am a volunteer, and I have volunteered and I continue to volunteer, and I always volunteer. One of my main concerns is the use of the word mandatory, and we said that we would proceed as though it is mandatory. And when you mandate something, when you make it that somebody has to do it, especially on a national level, the only way that I can think about that any action is mandated nationally is by having it written into law. That's how something becomes mandatory and how something becomes such that it needs to be done. So how would it be made mandatory? Would it be written into law? And we all know that when a law is established and not followed, then there's a penalty for it. So what would this really look like? Would it look like youth being fined, or what happens when the law is broken? Because that's the only way you can make something mandatory. If you don't do something, but then there's no penalty for not doing it, then it's not mandatory. So how would it look? Would youth be fined or imprisoned, or how would that mandatory aspect be actually implemented?
Peter, can you hear us? Yeah, I usually talk to you about policy informally, but I haven't heard you say anything about this one. So to respond to what Patrice is saying or asking, what's your overall take on the thing, and how do you see it working if it were to work out?
Yeah, I was listening with interest to what was being said. I should also declare my hand. I was one of the
Sorry, not hearing you very loudly, Peter.
Yeah, I said yeah. Is this any better?
Yeah, better now.
I need to click on something. I don't know.
No, you're better now.
Right. Yeah,
You're fine, Peter.
I was actually one of the first board members for the initial Barbados Youth Service when David Thompson set it up in the Ministry of Community Development, I believe. That was back in 1991, I believe, or something like that. Yeah, I think it was in the early 1990s. Um, when he set up this idea of this national youth service, and I was fortunate to be on board. It was, I mean, a really humble start, and I think all of us then expected that it would have become mandatory eventually. The initial proposal was for a mandatory one, but at the time, they didn't think that we had either the political capital to do it in a mandatory way or the money, because frankly, to manage a mandatory thing would have been very expensive. So that was essentially shelved, and what was a stopgap thing was the youth service that we now have. And the assumption is that if kids don't have anything else to do, they go into youth service. But if they find something else to do, automatically they come out of it. And I think that's the way that it works. I'm not sure if you all realize that they actually do have some fairly good youth service models in instance. All Israeli children have to serve in the army as part of their youth service. Although I guess their security issues are slightly different to everyone else's, but they have to serve and actually bear arms to some extent. The Swiss still do it as well. They have a national youth service, and all Swiss young people have to serve in the national youth service. They bear arms as well, and I think they actually get to take the guns with them after. It's a very familiar model, and they still have it in a very modern society. The Italians also did it up until very recently. They stopped it. But what would happen is that many Italians would essentially flee Italy when they were 18. And if you were away at university, you didn't have to do it, but once you were in Italy, you had to do it.
Nice.
And you served in the national youth service. I think it was paramilitary to some extent. And many kids who didn't feel that they were interested in that type of thing would go away to study conveniently around that time, and many never came back. So I think there's good precedent for it. Frankly, like Damien was saying, government of Barbados spends up to $40,000 a year on students at WA, and I think the IFLU are being funded to that extent, and you should have a responsibility to put something back. And as far as enforcement is concerned, my thing is very simple. Once you get to a certain age, you are in a continuing education program, you're receiving taxpayer-funded education, and you should be made to contribute. But my thing has always been that a youth service should not be that you force me to bear arms. For someone like me personally, that would not work, because I'm not interested in learning how to use a gun, because I have no desire to do such. But I feel that you could have a voluntary system where people can like, if you want language skills, or like teach people to read and write or literate, or you can teach people to do something. But my thing is try to find a youth service that makes use of the talents that you have. So if my talent is research, then I teach people how to do research, and that's my contribution, and I can count my hours that way. If it's that way, I think it would work. But I agree in principle that it's something that we should move towards, and it should be mandatory, especially if you are receiving education of an ongoing nature and taxpayers of Barbados are funding it to that extent. I don't see any problem with that at all. So that's where I am.
Well, Peter, to respond to you and to respond to Damien, I've sat back this week and just kind of read the responses as I normally do and sit on the fence and just observe what's being said. And I find that the people that are for it generally argue that, there's a lot of good involved. Like you're here arguing that you can access the service as it benefits the career that you're interested in and go in that direction. But I think the issue that people are having, as far as I can tell, most young people are having, is that they just can't get past the mandatory. Once I see that word mandatory, that's the part that has dominated everybody's attention. So you're talking about volunteerism on the one hand, but that you're telling them that they're going to be compelled to do this. And once you tell them that they're going to be compelled to do this, not only do they have a problem with that notion, they want to know what's going to happen if they don't or can't do it, because there's no mention being made of what happens to young people that have family obligations or can't participate for whatever reason. So I think that's an issue that a lot of people are having.
One of the challenges, I think the problem is that I don't know if it was the minister that raised it or somebody raised it for him, but it's bad timing. And I said this to him directly that you cannot raise anything like this now on the eve of an election and expect that we're going to have a mature or an adult discussion on it, even if it's about youth service. It's just impossible because these are not times to discuss anything like that. So my feeling is that if you want to put that on the table, Damien, if you were involved in it, y'all should. What is it, Damien? Have a picture?
I can't get my camera to work.
I thought you were trying to hide because you were a dem or something.
You
That,
don't
no,
have to
no,
let the
that
general
is
public know, Peter.
I
Hello.
think the general public knows that by now. I think that's a known fact.
But yeah, sorry, what was I say? It's not a good time to have this kind of discussion, and maybe if it was proposed initially, like early in the term, or perhaps even after the next term, it's something that could probably take root. But the marketing is bad. As far as the mandatory thing is concerned, I don't know that we should worry too much about it. 11 plus is mandatory, and if you don't do 11 plus what, you can't get locked up, but everybody does it. So if we can get to mandatory in the way that the 11 plus is mandatory, because I've never heard of a person objecting to doing it. People do it later, but for some reason everyone has to do it, and I don't know that it's written down anywhere that it's mandatory. If you don't do it, you get locked up for 6 months or something like that. But everybody does it, even people who are here, like the children of diplomats, I think that don't have to do it, still do it. So yeah. I like the mandatory thing. I don't know. I feel it's something that can work. It's just not though.
All right, we got a response from Maria K, then Patrice, then Jason. Turn on your mic, Maria. We're not hearing you. Maria? Not hearing Maria K.
Not at all, Maria.
No, we can't hear you.
Okay, Patrice, can you go ahead while we're waiting on Maria?
Well, I think that part, the part that is the most concerning to me, the what will happen if not, is really, really, really fundamental to the question because, I mean, mandatory is an extremely strong word. And if you're telling some person that they have to do something, I think it's unreasonable to not also follow it up with some sort of comprehensive description or some sort of informed, I don't know, some informed consent, I suppose, about what happens in the event that they don't do it. Because to say something is mandatory nationally and then you don't follow it up with some sort of explanation of what happens if it's not completed just seems really irresponsible. Because I think that the penalty or the possible consequences for not doing it would really influence how people see it. Because if you're going to say that a youth who has not done anything wrong but hasn't given back, so to speak, is going to be fined or is going to be penalized or is going to be imprisoned, that's a really serious thing. So I think that that's an area that really, really needs to be explored when we're talking about this thing that's going to be mandatory on a national level.
Maria, are you back with us, Maria K?
I think I'm back. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, and also so you can hear you typing away just now. Anyway.
Sorry, my apologies. My apologies.
Welcome, Maria. Welcome.
I'm a bit upset. I'm a bit thrown off by the fact that we are discussing that we have a problem with giving back, because this is what this is. This is giving back to our society, and I have an issue with that. I am in complete agreement with Peter when it comes to mandatory. We lack discipline. Young people lack discipline. We as a society lack discipline. This is going to instill a little discipline. I also don't think that we should be going the route of if it interests you, then you only go in that direction. There were things that didn't interest me in school, but had I been exposed to them, they would have shaped me or molded me and helped me make a better informed decision going forward. Giving back is 200 hours. I don't understand. There are a lot of laws that are mandatory. We're not up in arms about that. We have to pay taxes. It's mandatory. We can't litter. That's mandatory. We have to wear a seatbelt. We weren't up in arms about that. I'm confused why this is an issue. Anybody?
Well, I just wanted to jump in here again. Can you all hear me?
Wait, hold on, Damien. let the discussion take its due course. I think we had Jason after Maria, and then you.
All right, fine. Francis.
Or sorry, Lizelle, and then you.
Fine. Let's put me in the bottom. See?
Good night.
Hi, Jason.
You guys
Good
hear me?
night.
Good night. Pleased to join you all, this distinguished panel. My take on the situation, I guess I can say it from both sides. And as I was discussing with Damien sometime last week, I guess the wording is what I suppose concerns most young people. The fact that you have words like mandatory, positive sanctions, and so on. I think that throws off the whole thing. And I think the context in which it is being pushed, we have to remember that Barbados is a post-slavery society. So it's okay to say, well, look at Israel, look at the Swiss model or whatever the case may be, but in a society where you have people who, I guess, who can revert easily to something such as forced labor, which is what the, the policy or the services sounds like, and who can revert to that. So look, you're trying to make me, go back to days of slavery or whatever. I think that is something that, has to be watched. So I think the wording to some extent is off. I don't have a problem in terms of kind of cajoling, encouraging young people to serve. But I think where some young people have a problem is, let's say, for example, I give my 200 hours of service. How do I know that politician X's daughter or politician Y's son actually gives that same 200 hours? So then the question of fairness comes into that, to the whole equation, and how are you going to monitor, how are you going to evaluate, when we know pretty well that, government agencies aren't the best when it comes to, deciding or monitoring and evaluating and delivering justice, so to speak. So there are a lot of questions that I think, a lot of valid questions that young people raise. For example, persons such as myself may have given hundreds of hours, but I then be required now, I'm looking to retire from the movement and go on to something else. Would I be required now to give these 200 hours? Let's say they talk about um, organizations being selected or whatever. Who's to say that? Who's going to be doing the monitoring of these organizations? So I think there's some valid questions in there. The other thing that I was concerned about, or this issue has been around, let's say, it's been a new policy for a year and a half, and the fact is that we have young people who aren't interested in the meetings, who aren't interested in reading these policy documents, and I suppose it's by chance that Barbados today publish it, and all of a sudden young people are crying out, why am I being forced to do something against my will, etc., etc. So it really says a lot in terms of our young people's focus, and the fact that they aren't focusing on the things which will affect them in the long run. They're more focusing on the partying and all of that, and not on these policy issues. So that is, for me, that's the major concern which I have.
Damien, sorry, Lisa, and then Damien.
I guess to follow up on, I think Patrice mentioned it. It'd be interesting to see what is the quote unquote penalty if you don't complete your 200 hours. And I haven't looked at it properly. Is this only for Barbadian nationals, or is it for non-nationals living in the country also? I want to ask that. So enlighten me, people.
Non-nationals. I have no idea. Damien, is your time. Can you respond to that as well?
Legal non-nationals. Just
Funny enough, I don't think that actually ever came up at any of our meetings at the committee level. Neither did it come up at the town hall discussions, the community discussions that they would have had.
Is that because you were trying to put them out?
This is not a time for that kind of discussion, sir.
That's next week's topic. That's next week's topic.
Exactly. I'll be here for that. But what I want to say, to answer, I think it's Patrice. The thing is that because Barbados today only published that particular part of the policy, and unless you read the entire document, you will be a little lost. The document also speaks to the creation of a national youth board, a realignment of the the youth commissioners and so on, and a changing of their role in terms of as it relates to national Youth Service. And that's what they call it, right? Yeah, the National Youth Service. What they're
Our
supposed to
civic
do
service.
was that.
Our civic service.
Well, what they're supposed to do basically is monitor young people in their various organizations. So if it is that you're already in Kiwanis, then you can actually clock your hours in Kiwanis. As I said, if you're already engaged and involved, it's not an issue for you. But we all know young people who are not engaged and who are not involved. It's because they don't feel like it. They don't know what to do. And Francis, remember when we created, when we were creating the I volunteer concept along with Renee, that one of the things behind that was that you needed young people did not know where to go, how to get involved, and they needed some place, to get that information and stuff from. So once they have that information, they can clock their hours, and we all know the benefits of volunteering and giving back. 200 hours for 2 years. As I say, Francis, we spent more time in the youth council than we spent at our jobs. Don't let my boss hear about that. I really don't understand how it is that people would even begin to argue that, oh, monetary is not a strong word. My stepbrother's in Bermuda, and he joined the police force. If he didn't do that, he'd have to spend 2 hours in military service. This is not military service. This is volunteerism. So if it is that you're in a football club, if it is you're in Kiwanis, Optimus is a great organization, by the way. Just throwing that out there. Optimus International, look it up. Whatever it is that you're doing, once you're making a positive contribution to society, then that goes towards your what you call it, points, hours, whatever. I remember at the committee we were discussing, how it is that you get people to do this. As again, if you want to benefit from the education at tertiary level, you have to, if you don't clock your 200 hours, no UWI for you unless you plan to pay for it yourself. You're very academically inclined. You got a national development scholarship, or what is it that you get A levels again, or Cape, or whatever it is now?
Cape.
What do you call those, Francis? He's not even listening.
Cape.
Those scholarships that you get.
He's talking about the Barbados scholarship. That
Yeah. So you want to call it, you've done well academically, but you know what? You're not a rounded individual. No Barbados scholarship for you unless you've clocked those 200 hours. Honestly, people, the government spends so much money in educating our young people, and all of us have benefited from the education. Why is it that it's so hard to say, you know what, 2 hours a week, 3 evenings a week, I'll give out a Saturday every month. What is so hard about that? There's no argument, Patrice, no disrespect to you. There's just no argument. It is not military. You're not going to die. I wholeheartedly believe it should be mandatory. Francis, you know that you leave the youth council, but you're not leaving the youth movement, or you're not leaving volunteerism. Once a volunteer, always a volunteer. So that's all it is. That's it.
I think that, should I go, or am I in the line? I'm not sure.
Let Renee indicate that he wants to say something. Let Renee go on that, and then you follow him.
No, I was just saying, I think actually also to what some people were confusing it with is that they're going to end up in the youth service, and certain people see the youth service as for a particular class bracket. I've been seeing this all through this. And on top of that, how David is explaining it, if you can do your hours with any of these organizations, is not military. It's actually, so I think actually that has to be talked about more, and I agree with everybody saying that it has to be talked about more. I need the last thing I was going to say as well, I agree with Peter, this is just bad timing. This is not something that you can see smoothly implemented with the election looming right now. And this is something that should have been totally brought up and discussed either earlier in the term or something that will happen.
But it was discussed for almost 2 years.
No, but that's what I said, but being brought up at this point where you're talking about putting it into actual law and policy and bring this to actual parliament, it's I know that it's been going for 2 years, and that's the next thing too. It's been going for 2 years, but how many people have been involved? It really was not put out there saying that we're trying to do this. I know that it was Damien.
No, I would not let you get away with that right now.
That's the point. That's the point of view right now. That young people weren't very interested in that sort of thing.
They did not care.
So it's only people that Barbados they actually brought it up.
Wait, people! Before y'all proceed, I just want to welcome a young lady who I've known for a long time. I didn't know that she was invited here tonight, but I'm glad to see her because I know that she's somebody who's familiar with the VYZE concept. Ramona, good night. I think I could say
Hi, Ramona.
several of the people, I won't say a lot, I won't name any number, but several of the people in this discussion are either on the tall side of that 15 to 29 age
The
group,
what size, Corey?
the tall side of it,
Oh.
or they
I'm
fall,
still 18, okay.
or they fall just outside of it. But I know for sure that Ramona falls inside of the age group, so I'd be interested to hear what she, as somebody who falls within the age group, actually thinks about it. You know, what her thoughts have been the last few days since it's been announced. Ramona?
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I can.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have a lot to say. I just know that when I first heard it, I felt like I felt like they were just, taking my time without any sort of consultation at all. And then just having to just, randomly going on the paper and just reading about it as opposed to, some sort of, broadcast.
They go mad for you, just so you know.
I know, and I'm not done yet. And I'm not done yet.
Go on.
Because my job is pretty demanding. I do a lot of overseas travel, around the region. So I'm out at least once a month, and then I'm trying to do my MBA. So I feel like my time is pretty much stretched, and then in between trying to do things like the Barbados Voice Actors Association, any other theater, and then plus trying to get in, some classes of karate, I feel pretty stretched. So then for them to come and say, oh yeah, you got give us this time, it sounded ridiculous. But listening to people and them saying, well, it's only an hour here or hour there, I'm like, I guess if you can rearrange your time, maybe do like an hour on a Saturday or something like that, it might seem more manageable. But on first hearing it, it really seems pretty heavy on a person's schedule, and I don't even have kids to add to that mix. So I know that there are other people who have been on my Facebook who would have felt the same way. And also one of the other things I feel about is I feel like it's gonna be the same way as everything else, where you get these 10 people who are gonna be really, really committed to it, and they're gonna pull the weight for the other 90. And that's how I feel like it's gonna be, because I really can't see, no scabby missing effect for this, if you want to start with me. So go ahead.
No scabby missing effect. Well, before Damien jump in here, right, I just want to read something from Juliet that she wrote in a thread actually on the VYZE page. She's not here with us in the discussion tonight, but I'm going to borrow some of her words. She said there were public invitations, so Damien, you can follow on from this and you can either fill in the gaps or correct anything. There were public invitations. This is what preceded the actual announcement of the youth policy last week. This is what preceded it. There were public invitations for persons to come and hear about youth policy and give their input. Some people went, their input was recorded. Ministry of Youth also asked that any persons that wanted to write something and submit were free to do so. This is of their own volition and their own accord. Then they had further meetings where they invited people to come and they incorporated the amendments that frequently came up. They even changed the locations of these meetings so young people all over the island could contribute to at least one. And the draft youth policy has been on the website for ages, she says. I think the draft youth policy, and Damien could confirm this too, was announced in March 2011. So I don't know if it's been online since that time. But yeah, that was Juliet's point. Just to set a couple things clear in terms of this suggestion that is being sprung upon people. So Damien, you can follow on from that.
Yeah, well, it's correct. As I said, I remember that over a year ago, the committee handed the policy over to the minister. I remember at one point I was actually very upset because we thought the consultations were over, and the minister was like, "No, we have to do it. We have to do some more." And we went. And I can remember, going in my work clothes, setting up a booth, telling my boss it was on business, so that we can do these consultations. This was in St. Peter. And so I mean, it was open to so many people, and it was going back and forth. If the Barbados today did not pull out that particular part of the policy and print, none of you guys, the ones who say you didn't know, would have been aware, and it would have been debated in Parliament. A policy that directly relates to you if you're between the ages of 15 to 29, and you would not have been aware. Well, it's really your responsibility, to make yourself aware of things and issues that affect you. So I'm actually a little disappointed with some of you, Lizelle, wink wink, who did not know after all of the media and the hype, and it was just crazy. For the young lady who came on who was doing her MBA, that is no excuse, my dear, not to give back. I'm sorry. I'm doing my masters as well, and I probably clock at least 20 hours a week still, in volunteer mode, among all the other things that I do. So when I hear young people make the argument, "Oh, I'm too busy with work and da 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 da," not true. If your teachers only taught you between the hours of 9 and 3 o'clock and then give extra to you, you would not be able to achieve what it is that you have achieved. And it is our responsibility to make sure that we pave the way for those who are coming behind us, because those ahead of us would have paved the way for us as well. So it's no, you don't climb up the ladder and then say, "No, what, I'm on top of the ladder and let me kick it down." An hour a week, 2 hours here, 2 hours there, and you'd mentioned that you're into karate, I think, and theater and drama and so on, and that would actually count towards your 200 hours as well.
Damien,
Okay.
what media outlets did you advertise these
Yeah. CBC
by?
hot 96 point, anything you could think of, Renee, this thing was on. It was
And
crazy.
I must say that with my experience with the BYDCR, most youth aren't in Barbados. That there is some sort of advertisement, and people who are interested tend to hear. I was not in the island for a couple of years, so I think that's why I did not know about it. So I would say that I understand why people would not know about it, but I also understand why some people might feel like, well, you should know because it was out there. But my concern, and I feel like if whenever I raise this, everybody's just kind of dancing around the issue, and then gets um, the conversation gets put back onto the positives, and it gets put back onto all the different things that could possibly be done and could possibly count as volunteer service or not. But I don't feel like if anybody is actually coming right out and saying what is going to happen to the youth that do not do it. That's all I want to know, because as soon as this question is raised, the conversation kind of gets rerouted into, well, let's not stress too much on the word mandatory. Let's think of all the different ways that it can be implemented. You could do it through this way, you could do it through that way. It will only be this number of hours a month. And that may be true. And that's not my concern. I just want to know what is going to happen if after all the encouragements and the positive sanctions.
No, I agree.
Hold on, people. Jason looks like he had a comment he wanted to say, and Renee wanted to say something as well as Damien. Damien, you just had the floor, so just give way a little bit.
Yeah, no problem, moderator.
I want to make a point here too in relation to what Patrice is saying, which is I find that a lot of the language that's being used is pretty vague. Like I've been reading it, and it sounds pretty like airy-fairy in some ways, and I can't tell now if the minister is coming back and saying that it's not going to be compulsory. I don't get what the announcement is. Is it just that the National Youth Service, or is it just that volunteerism in Barbados is being streamlined? Is that all he's saying if it's not going to be mandatory? And in addition to that too, and this would have come in from some of my informal BBM discussion with a point I don't want to get lost here tonight is the fact that so many young people don't have any interest in politics or things political. And then you have something like this, which is announced, and they're outraged because they feel like something is being sprung upon them. When there were meetings that went on and discussions that were open to the public, and they don't feel any desire to attend these meetings because, as far as they're concerned, that's something for old people that is long and boring, and it's still something that ultimately affects you. So I just want to add that into the discussion because I want to make sure it doesn't get lost tonight. So Francis, I think you had something to say, and as did Renee, and then Damien.
Yeah, but to Patrice's question, I honestly think it more so targets mainstream youth. Why you say that is because when you talk about positive sanctions and you refer to things like um, having the university degree paid for that sort of stuff. Honestly, the young person out there who's on the block, who's smoking, who doesn't give a damn about life, this is not really going to affect them because how are you going to, again, how are you going to ensure that they give $200? So I don't really see it affecting those young people, and I honestly think it's more so targeted at the quote unquote mainstream young people. And for that reason, I think to some extent it is. I am not too fussed about it because I don't think it's going to work if it is mandatory. That's my honest opinion. I can't say. I, some people ask me, I get some nicks about it because people say, well, how come this is out there and BYZE didn't respond to it? Honestly, I read through the document, but I'll probably skim over that aspect of it. So if people want to give me licks for that, fine. We did make the suggestion that we didn't see the what philosophical or ideological basis the document was couched in. In other words, I said there's the rights-based approach, there's the demand-driven approach. Now you said the rights-based approach to me would be the best approach to have the document framed in. If you talk about a rights-based approach, then perhaps this is not a mandatory thing, it's not framed in a rights-based approach. And at the end of the day, yes, you're looking to take care of the needs of young people and so on, but what responsibilities do these young people have? So I guess that's the other side of the coin. But honestly, I don't see it working if it is mandatory. And just to put another little spin on it, I see the minister came back in Barbados today and said it's not going to be mandatory. In terms of the political aspect of it, I could say he probably lost a good few votes as it pertains to the vote in the upcoming election. And I don't know how I think he's supposed to be at it next week, Tuesday in Parliament. He's very good at his PR, but I don't know how he's going to get around this one. So I think it's mainly for mainstream young people. And I think the big issue for them, for the policymakers and whoever's involved in the election campaign, is how you target the young people who really don't give a damn. Who, you know, anyway,
Jason, what is mainstream youth in your definition of it?
Mainstream youth is like all the persons who are the young persons who are into university, who are doing, who looking to quote unquote get something out of life, who are not the ones that the police are running around behind, who utilize the secondary schooling, who are looking for yes, a decent job or decent employment, not the ones who are supposedly smoking the weed, smoking the herb, involved in nefarious activity, if you want to call it that. Those are the young people who are traditionally considered the mainstream young people.
Careful with that, Jason. When I was at UA, I heard I was the only body that wasn't smoking weed. Anyhow.
well, what you are doing, so
I like how you turned out, Corey.
You're getting an education at a higher degree. So, you can have all the other things tagged on you, even if you're smoking.
Higher learning is what you're getting at. Okay.
But Jason, you just said all of that, right? And you said they're not really targeting these boys on the block. But you also have this set of people that are going to say that, well, I'm too busy, as was just said actually by Ramona, I'm too busy, I have an education to get, I don't have time to do this. So are they going to think that this mandatory thing should be for the boys on the block and not them? Because they're already productive members of society. So
that's a good question.
Are you a productive member of society if you haven't given back to society?
Maybe you need to contribute to the economy.
There are many ways of giving back to society rather than working for free.
What's that?
That there are many ways of giving back to society that might not necessarily come under the definition of what may be popularly considered to be volunteering.
I think that if you want to be a well-rounded individual, that there must be some component of your development that sees you as an individual giving back. What's funny is that American children, when they want to get into university, are running helter-skelter to find opportunities to volunteer because they know the only way that they're going to be even considered on the company list is if they have some voluntary component to their development, some form of extracurricular activity. So they'll be come here in Barbados where when the California students get here, they're always amazed that our tuition costs are paid for. And I am hearing people arguing that they cannot give back 200 hours because of this, that, and the third. I think it's ridiculous. I should be the minister because this would be enforced tomorrow morning, and all of those people who are at university who have not started to clock those hours would be deregistered. It is ridiculous. I cannot even believe that anybody would.
If you were in minister,
Hold on.
Here's the shit, Damien. Damien, that's
I want to jump in at some point.
All right, let's hear Lisa.
One more point, just quickly, one more point.
Okay,
Discussion about a national youth policy is not new. The discussion has been going on since 1995, 96. When Mia was then Minister of Youth, and she was saying that, you know what, the country doesn't need a national youth policy because it's lived, and there was funding available from the Commonwealth Youth Program for the writing and development of a national youth policy. All of our brothers, most of our brothers and sisters across the Caribbean have active youth policies, and you know they've just updated them and so on and so forth. And the thing is that this is mandatory component. You see, I've been around a while longer than Jason, and in the youth movement at the national level. And I remember in 2001 having a discussion with the then principal youth development officer about this same very recommendation. So it's nothing new. It's been out there, it's been bandied about back and forth forever. Even back from Peter's time when it was the creation of the National Youth Service. Nah. So I'm just at a loss as to why it is that persons get upset that doing 200 hours of community service. It's crazy.
Back in Peter's time. Wow.
Yes, back when Peter was
oh boy. Damien, I don't know the people that you know, but I know many people who have not volunteered all the hours that you put together have, and they've turned out to contribute very well to society. So I don't think volunteering any X amount of hours makes you any better a citizen than someone who doesn't. I think that's just way out there. Secondly, to bring America into this, they're also allowed to carry. They also have a right to bear arms. So should we do that too? And let's just have our guns as we go to school now too, since America volunteers, so we should do it too. I don't like that. I don't like that we're always like looking to, oh, America does it and their students do it. Okay, pause.
I strongly agree that volunteering makes you a more rounded person. I agree with that. I volunteer locally, regionally, internationally. However, as strongly as I believe that volunteering makes you a well-rounded person, I don't think my ideas about what a human should look like in terms of well-roundedness ought to be forced on anybody legally or ought to be mandated. So true though that may be, and wonderful that it is, that doesn't mean that I get to tell somebody they should volunteer because it's good for them. Exercise is also good for them. Do I also get to mandate that?
I agree with Patrice.
Well, actually, was equality of this volunteering, because if your idea of volunteering is gonna, that because you're mandated to do it, you're just gonna show up and do the bare minimum. I don't see that that's gonna make you a more well-rounded person than if it was something you actually wanted to do.
If I could jump in here.
Yeah, wait, hold on a second, Jason. Maria B is leaving us, so Maria, have a good night. Maria's off to work. Thanks for being part of the discussion, Maria.
Bye, Maria.
Bye, Maria.
Bye, Maria.
Right, if I could jump in now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you go ahead.
Right, Ramona's point is an interesting point and something that we're pondering, because obviously in VYZE we lack for volunteers as well. And what you're finding is that, I guess, this circumstance, the period which we're in, you're finding that more young persons are going after qualifications. So you have somebody who comes out of university, the next year they're going to get a master's, they continue with professional certification, they'll be working, all of that. And it's like the hours which they would, which someone probably, let's say in Peter's time, might probably get back in terms of volunteering.
So with a Peter's time.
Peter is the benchmark for all things admin. How unfair.
Peter, so sorry.
Would have given back. No, you find that young persons find themselves constricted and feel that they must, in order to get ahead, they must keep on studying and finding out work experience. The second thing is, which I think is an issue, is that we still have a kind of democratic, socialist, welfare society And the thing is, you're recognizing, or the government is still supporting young persons, is still giving them the free education and so on. But how do we get them now to to more or less, or yeah, to give back, to say, we appreciate this or whatever. But the thing is that yes, some young people feel entitled, some young people feel it is government, it is my right to have education up to tertiary level, but I shouldn't feel obligated to give back. And then how do you kind of get that mentality? How do you get young persons to it is kind of like a tight, for me, it's a tightrope to walk. Because on one hand, you have government saying, government still, well, according to Ron, just being committed, but on the other hand, you want to show young people that, you know, we trying to roll back that kind of mendicant mentality which is setting and it's getting more and more difficult to do. For me, this is government's way of rolling back that mentality. But all of a sudden, now there's this push by young people, no, you can't force us. We have rights, we're liberated, you can't force us to do this. So I think it's a tightrope to walk for the policymakers.
Yeah,
And
let me
they
jump
need
in
to be
here.
more creative in order to solve
Let
this
me jump
problem.
in here, Jason. Just to clarify for any viewers out there, when Jason says mendicant, he's just referring to this kind of attitude that looks for handouts. I would love to get a comment from the older young person in the conversation because people have said in the chat that he's exceedingly quiet. Before he does give a comment, if he's been listening in, I wanted to read something, one of the comments that came from one of the various threads. I think this one was from the BYDC page. It said the basis behind volunteerism is the willingness to do something, not because you have to, but because you want to. So correct me if I'm wrong, but a mandate makes it an obligation. Therefore, the joy of waking up and saying I'm going today and work with these kids, I'm going today to work with these kids, will become as tedious as most young people find school. If you want someone, especially a young person, to enjoy something, a mandate is not the correct approach. Having read that, Peter, if you will, just give your thoughts on the things that you're hearing.
What the comments that I've been hearing, other than the ones about my age, are entirely reasonable and expected. And I mean, whenever government decides to put this issue back on the table, these are the kinds of things that they will have to look at. They have to look at, can I say no, and so on. If I say no, then what are the consequences? And then definitely, yeah, they need to think how are we going to deal with these hours and how clocking the hours. And then this whole question of elitism, whether or not people will be able to opt out of it. And I kind of wondered if, for example, anyone should really want to opt out of it. If it's really structured, I don't know that young people would really want to opt out of it. Um, Doctors don't get to opt out of doing an internship because it's required for them to be able to be licensed. And I mean, an internship is, for all intents and purposes, community service. You do work on patients for which you're not really paid well, you get allowance. And that type of thing to me is what I'm thinking about. So I think that all of the issues that you all are raising are reasonable, and I think that a properly functioning youth service can get around this. The philosophical objective of forcing everyone to give up their time, I think is good, and I think it's good for society. And I don't know, even today when we're becoming so consumer oriented and whatnot, I don't know that there's still not place for that. When I was at university, I was like, like a lot of you guys involved in everything that was on the table. I think it helps to build the constitution. So yeah, that's why I'm quiet. I can't really hear anything objectionable.
You just respond to stuff that you object to. Thank you.
Or support as the case may be, and it's to me this idea is one that is difficult for people to oppose. Once people get past this whole question of being forced to do something, it's difficult to oppose. Actually, I think Guyana has one too. I meant to mention that Guyana has a youth service, and it's done through the army. A lot of people try to skip it, but I think they have a mandatory youth service as well. I don't know if Jason might remember that.
Peter, before you go off, well, not go off, but you know what I mean. Before you give up the floor, What do you think about having the government having their next step being to have a national consultation on this? And this will be presumably after the election, whenever that is.
Another consultation for it?
No, but yeah, but hold on, not a consultation that is open to the public. I'm talking about stakeholders and youth representatives to notate what is on the table and to talk about what's realistic and how it should properly be structured. Peter, that was for you. Sorry.
I think that government needs to put a paper on the table and carry something to Parliament and just do it. I don't see why there needs to be any more consultation. This national youth consultation has been going on for so long. To me, all it is an excuse for a fact. I don't really know what's coming out of it. They had a big launch, and they have these activities and so on, and restaurants and food. But I just find the consultation to me hasn't really been yielding the kind of information I would like to think it should yield. And I would hate for them to have even with stakeholders. There are times in life that one has to say, look, I would take people by the hand and say, this is what you all need to do. And this is what I think government needs to do in this situation. So stop the old talk and just get cracking. It's like the public privatization of the public service that has to happen soon in Barbados. Are you going to have a national consultation on privatization when everybody's going to oppose it? Of course not. You say to people, look, this is good for you. It's like medicine and it's something that, because it will make us better. Like immunization.
Right after the election, presumably. Right after the election. As close after that as possible.
Yeah, actually, I just want to say for me,
Guyana,
go ahead, Lisa.
Guyana did have a national youth service. They kind of came out on their our little dabble in socialism on the fourth freedom. But the current government, it's been scrapped under the current government, I think up to this year. Okay. So there was a youth service in place, but up to this year, and I can send you guys the link, they've gotten rid of it. So it's no longer mandatory.
So this is why you travel so much?
Yeah, I was trying to escape.
No, I actually think the discussion now should really be how it's going to be implemented, more so than having more discussions on should we really have this and should we have that. Really, how you're going to implement it. As you were saying before, Patrice, what are the consequences if you don't do it? I think that's where we should be going.
I like the implementation. I feel we've exhausted what's going to happen if you don't do it, because I think we're pretty sure nobody here can answer that question. Not even Damien.
No, but I'm actually incorporated to the discussion that also too, not us, but with the discussion what the country should be having and the government should be having with us.
I think the conversation about implementation is an important one, especially in terms of the time frame, because the time frame given to do it is a really long time frame. So I really think that there needs to be some clarity on that, because how about if you go to university, you go to you take all your secondary education, the government funds it, but you say that you're not going to do it until you're like 28. Is it that when 28 comes and you don't do it, then you have to retroactively pay for your degree? Or like, how does that work with such a huge time frame? And also, one of the concerns about the time frame is that, say you have to do something when you turn 18, by using birth records or whatnot, people can calculate approximately how many people are going to turn 18 in that year, so they know, all right, these will be the people coming for volunteerism. But if you can go any time between 15 and 29, how will won't it be difficult to get a handle on how many people are going to come in a given year? If it's going to be 4,000 people, it's going to be 40,000 people. All those parts seem kind of hairy, and is that because of the big range, and it's not like when you turn 18.
Gotcha. Damien, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, do we have a situation where people go from secondary school right through to university and don't belong to any? Actually, no, what? I've answered my question. Yes, we do. Oh, is this beyond me? I just can't get it understand. That you would leave secondary school, let's say you left at 16 and went to BCC, then go on to UB or whatever the case may be, and you don't join one organization, you don't have one curricular activity, because
There are lots of young people like that, Damien.
I know, and I just, as I said, I just answered my own question. But my thing is what are we going to do with them? Are we just going to throw our hands in the air and say, you know what? They don't want to volunteer, they don't want to give back. As I said, when the discussion came up at the community level, the committee was looking at tying the community hours to your university studies, to your scholarships, etc., etc. So therefore, if it is that you wanted to go to UE, then you really should start clocking some of those hours as soon as possible to make sure that you qualified and you had at least enough hours on your belt. Let's say it was half the hours, 100 hours, whatever, on your belt before you actually were accepted to enroll into UE or be able to receive government sponsorship of your university education. UE, BCC, this polytechnic, anything that's government sponsored, and you want to get it. You know what? Clock some hours, give some time. And the best time to get to volunteer is when you're actually younger, when the only thing that you have is time, because as you get older, you might have some funds, you may be able to sponsor. But when you're younger, you don't really have funds, but what you do have is time.
I just wanted to try something, and I guess Peter could probably respond to this. When we look at the whole national youth service and so on, is it a matter of the state becoming too involved in the lives of citizens and trying to regulate the lives of citizens?
The state could never be too involved.
I don't say that. No,
I beg to differ.
No, seriously. But for example, when we talk,
leadership, Damien.
when we talked about the
Machiavelli was a good
how
man.
it be implemented and so on. Obviously, there's going to be youth development board, but no, along with that, the same organizations have to be registered with the youth development board and all of that. So therefore, it means now that these organizations, which perhaps might have been autonomous to some extent, but these organizations to some extent would even be subject to you know state regulations or whatever. And for me, that might not be seen as a problem at the moment if you say you want your organization to be, part of this national youth service. But for me, then it raises questions of legitimacy and so on. Because if my organization doesn't want to become part of, it is an organization which offers, volunteer stuff, but it doesn't want to necessarily become part of being registered with the state. I mean, are you going to be excluded? Is it going to be some
I want to know what organization that would be.
Whatever.
What are you doing on the site?
No, but seriously, and we know how the political machinations go. We had I did the National Youth Forum, which I know Damon, myself not held about, which was more or less, well, I was going to say here before Corey posted fund the World Wide Web, but the whole National Youth Forum, which again was part of the state's bill, saying, look, let us create our own body, our own not only volunteer body, but our own NGO. So and the question for me is, where does it stop? And is it more about giving somebody a political fillip than actually wanting young people to experience and be engrossed in giving back to the society?
Before anybody else goes, something that I was saying since last week. I find something I talk about a lot in general, just to make a comparison, if I could call it a parallel, is the customer service in this country. And I frequently have that conversation with a friend who lives overseas, has Bajan parents, but is American, right? And he said that if you want to change attitudes to customer service in Barbados, you will have to you will have to forget the generations now, adults and young adults, and focus on children, right? In terms of instilling attitudes in them that would change our social fiber and our attitudes as a people towards serving people, no matter what service that is that you offer. And I kind of think the same thing about this. I mean, I don't really have the answer as to what at the primary school level should happen, but I just think that rather than trying to force a new attitude on people who have not grown up accustomed to that and trying to get them accustomed to an idea, that you will probably better off, introducing something at a younger level, which would kind of accustom them to the idea in their formative years, if we could call them that. And then when they reach their teens, then phase them into that. Just to add that in. But not to forget, too, that we're talking about implementation here.
This
Someone,
is why
anyone?
No, this is why for me, I think actually doing this would work better if you start doing this as a project in schools, in secondary schools, where the schools choose something that they want to do as a project for either their school, their community, or something like that, and they do this in the secondary school, going into communities, and if it's like fixing homes or helping some organization or something like that, that to me is more digestible, and I think can involve all the youth and they get accustomed to it, because you're quite correct. Just throwing this out, somebody that's 25 is going to feel like, oh my gosh, why am I going to be doing this now? So I think that everybody should do something to give back to society. I just think it would work better if we focus on that younger bracket first, my opinion. Oh, it's Percy the pig. Sorry.
In terms of implementation too, some of what Jason was saying about the actual organization, I find that's another area that would need to be discussed or talked about. I mean, which organizations are young people going to be able to volunteer at? Who's going to be doing the vetting and the certification? How is that all going to work? Because in reading it, that's one of the things that was being talked about, that certain organizations would be vetted, organizations would be certified. That just sounds to me like a lot more paperwork and a lot more hours. Like, you might actually have to end up hiring people to do that, to manage all these people ages 15 to 29 who are coming in at any time, because it doesn't specify a time you have to come in, who have to be assigned to places and who have to have their hours logged. These places have to be vetted, they have to be certified, they have to be followed up with to ensure that young people aren't being abused. Young people are in an ideal situation, would be placed in instances where their interests are matched up with what the company or what the organization offers. It seems like a lot of logistical things that would need to be considered.
Now we do prevent corruption.
I agree with that, because like I'm thinking, oh, this is my cynical dark side, because I'm like, okay, so you have these young people and they're volunteering, and I can see people taking advantage of that situation. So there could be some sort of blackmail coming out of that. Oh, you want me to sign off on your volunteer hours? Well, then you have to do X, Y, Z. Or what if, like, how is this criteria? How is it going to be monitored?
How votes get auctioned.
Yeah, or how is this going to be monitored?
Excuse me, Corey.
I'm a young female, and somehow I'm volunteering in some situation where it's dark and it's midnight and there are only men, and like all of these, like how is that going to be monitored? Like, let's just get real. And it's all, I agree, it's all well and good, and you should give back to society and all this stuff, but what about all those other things? Or are we just going to be like, yeah, this is the law, let's go ahead? How is it going to be monitored? How is it implemented? How are we moving forward with that?
Who's to say one person's child wouldn't end up volunteering at the UN while somebody else's child has to clean or debush something? Like, how is all of that going to be monitored?
And I think that's going to be a big thing too, because as I have been saying before, there are going to be certain class issues that are going to come up, like being assigned to certain types of jobs, and that's just the honest truth. So I'm very concerned the direction it goes in. Damien, I agree in volunteering. I believe in volunteering.
The Prince of Wales scrub toilets as a volunteer. Anybody can do. Oh my god!
I know
why are we having a discussion about all the things that go wrong? Why are we not talking about the positive attributes of the recommendation?
Yeah, but then that's a point when it was a valid point. How are you going to get the Indian children to volunteer? How are you going to quote unquote?
You're telling me that they don't volunteer now, Francis? You know that's not true.
Who says so? I got Indian children in my class. They know they're not integrated in Barbadians. How are you going to get them to volunteer?
I can't hear you well, Jason.
Yeah, Jason, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was saying, how are you going to get, for example, the Indian children to volunteer? How are you going to get, quote unquote, the white children to volunteer?
But Jason, I
Issues
mean,
of
But
class
these
and
things
race.
are realistic
Issues of
concerns.
class and race are going
but
to
no,
exist.
you're. Let's talk about the white kids.
No, let's talk about the
They're saying that
Indians.
they
The
don't
whites don't
volunteer
volunteer.
already,
All right,
Jason. They all.
let's
Well,
talk
they
about
volunteer
Indians.
in certain things. They volunteer in certain things. That's what I'm saying. They might feel
But
that they should be
did y'all
involved.
read the document? I think some of y'all did not read. Y'all
I
read the
read
Barbados
those
today.
pages. I read those
Exact.
pages.
Extract.
But the Barbados
No,
today
I
is
read
the
those
exact extract,
pages.
didn't it? Is the
No,
exact extract.
because the document clearly states that it'll be up to you to find something that you're comfortable in doing. So some persons will be comfortable being in Kiwanis or Optimists or whatever the case may be. Some persons might be in Scouts. All these things are part of your community service. Some persons might just join some community group. So some people might be comfortable cutting bush. Some people
Yeah.
might not be. But it's
It's
entirely
all
up
true.
to you in terms of how and what organizations that you go and you volunteer with. Obviously, it has to be some reputable organization that is registered.
Damien, who will be comfortable cutting bush in this country when the boy walk cut cane?
I cut bush, Corey.
But the thing
I pick
is,
up trash in St.
And
John.
we're really, really proud of you.
This is me we talking about. You imagine me taking up bush? And I do it.
Yeah.
And I had a
I
grand.
want pictures.
Yeah,
David.
but
I
if
want
given a
pictures.
choice though.
I feel like Damien's a little more
Where are you taking
invested
up
than the
bush?
rest of us.
Sorry, one body at a time, though, one body at a time.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm not buying these arguments. I'm very, very sorry.
But
and it's
I have a
go ahead,
question.
Ramona.
Thanks. So you're saying that the scouts will count and the Kiwanis and all those things will count towards giving back, but the government in the I haven't read the document, but in the article it said that the government was doing this so that they could try to save money. So are there going to be like is there going to be like a specific program as to what people are going to be doing? Because like if like the little Kiwanis want cent
I
drive,
want to
not
hear
really save the
Ramona.
government a lot of money.
No,
So I'm wondering.
Barbados, they said that, but the policy document did not say that.
No, it does,
Okay.
Damien. Barbados today is the exact extract. I read it word for word.
Yeah, but the policy does not speak to government saving money, does it?
It does, yes, Damien.
if
It's the
it-
exact
yeah.
extract. I
It
fully
said that
read
the
it.
it said that the
It
government was
said-
doing this so they try to save money. So I was like,
So-
well, if
so-
you could just join Kiwanis and whatever, and you could just go to meetings and such, and you've contributed, how does that save the government money? How is that, doing more than you were doing when you were saying no?
You know what I'm going to say? I'm going to put some lashes in the government now. See?
Personally, I think it's a red herring and it's a distraction for the real issues
it's
at
a
hand.
political gimmick.
I
It's
just- I think it's a
But
bit
that's
too
like-
convenient, the timing that this came out, and conspiracy theorist, I want to know what they're covering up. Because it's just convenient that this come out now. Everybody discussing and everybody distracted by this. I'm waiting for when they drop whatever the real issue is.
These are like they just want to put ticks on their manifesto. We said on the manifesto we will do this, they need to take it off before the election. And that is